Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into a fascinating lecture on ancient leadership philosophy, specifically unpacked from Chapter 16 of Morals and Dogma. Now, if you've been following along with our recent discussions, you know we've spent a lot of time talking about personal resilience, rebuilding the self from the inside out. But today, we're zooming way out. We are stepping into the massive, and frankly intimidating, arena of societal leadership and just governance. This text carries some serious historical weight, and it essentially asks, what actually happens when you step out of your own personal journey and finally assume the heavy mantle of leading others?
So, let's kick things off by putting you right in the hot seat with a classic Socratic question about your own relationship with power. Just imagine, if someone handed you real, absolute authority tomorrow, maybe that's in your business, your local community, or even a broader political sphere, how exactly would you use it? Seriously, think about it. Would you use it to secure your own position? Or would you use it to lift up the people you're supposed to be leading? Keep that in the back of your mind as we go, because it's pretty much the ultimate test for everything we're about to cover.
Consider this our course syllabus for today's masterclass on the ethics of power. We're going to hit 5 main pillars: moving beyond the self, the justice of governance, balancing authority and fairness, wisdom and the greater good, and finally, the burden of accountability.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, moving beyond the self.
So, in this ancient school of thought, the absolute first monumental shift any leader has to make is moving away from their own internal desires. Now, when you hear the phrase Prince of Jerusalem, don't get hung up on the literal words. It's not a royal title you inherit. Rather, it's the ultimate philosophical archetype of an ethical, responsible leader. It's really a state of mind, a pure, unshakable dedication to fairness and justice over any kind of personal gain. When we talk about this archetype today, we're talking about the idealized version of leadership that anyone in authority should be striving to embody.
Because at this elite level, leadership is absolutely no longer personal. It becomes a strict obligation to society. A true leader has to just completely shun personal gain, think way beyond their own individual interests, and act with a much, much broader perspective. The moment you accept authority, your goals just aren't yours alone anymore. Every decision you make ripples outward and impacts the collective. Your role literally becomes a public duty.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, the justice of governance.
Because look, selflessness is great, but on its own, it's just not enough. It has to be grounded in a rigid framework of fairness. The source text is completely uncompromising here, stating without justice, authority becomes abuse. It's a harsh truth, but if you have power and lack a deep-seated commitment to fairness, you're not actually leading, you're dominating. And as history shows us time and time again, domination inevitably decays into corruption and the abuse of the exact people you were put there to serve.
So how do you actually prevent that? Well, to make sure justice is applied consistently, a leader has to operationalize these 3 unbending rules. First, making fair decisions. And I mean, that requires immense, sometimes painful objectivity. Second, actively avoiding favoritism. You have to consciously put aside your buddies, your alliances, your personal biases. And third, upholding the truth, even and especially when that truth is politically inconvenient or totally unpopular. A true leader uses this 3-step checklist for literally every aspect of their daily governance.
Let's move on to Section 3, balancing authority and fairness.
Now we're getting to the dialectical core of our lecture today, the infamous tightrope walk of governance. Authority is, for sure, absolutely necessary to keep a system functioning, but it has to be so meticulously controlled. If you lean too hard into authority, those rigid chains of control will lead you straight into oppression and corruption. But flip it around. A tornado of leniency with zero structure, that just leads to absolute disorder and gross inefficiency. If you stray too far in either direction, the whole system collapses. The true art of leadership is finding that exact, precarious balance point in the middle, where structure is there to support people, not to crush them.
All right, heading into Section 4, wisdom and the greater good.
Finding that sweet spot between authority and leniency isn't just about being smart. It requires something way deeper. It requires actual wisdom. Because knowledge is just knowing the rules, right? But wisdom is knowing exactly when and how to apply them. The text outlines that true wisdom comes from 3 key things: understanding that every single decision triggers a chain reaction, thinking long-term, like way past the immediate quarter or the next election cycle, and finally, stepping entirely out of your own echo chamber to genuinely consider multiple perspectives. That kind of multidimensional thinking is what makes a decision not just effective, but actually fundamentally just.
Okay, here is the ultimate reality check of this entire philosophy. True leadership is not self-serving. Period. You have to prioritize the collective, act for the benefit of others, and intentionally sacrifice your own personal interests when the situation demands it. Serving the greater good means that service is the absolute beating heart of your leadership. If your decisions are constantly enriching you while somehow depleting your team or your community, well, you've completely lost the path of the Prince of Jerusalem.
And that brings us to our final stop today, Section 5, the burden of accountability.
As we hit the final stage of our philosophical journey, we arrive at the ultimate test. With immense power comes an equally massive weight of responsibility. A true leader has to step up and take full responsibility for their decisions, especially when things go south. You have to operate with total transparency so everyone can see your process and, this is the tough one, you have to cheerfully accept correction. A leader who genuinely believes they are beyond reproach is a leader who's already failing. Accountability is that heavy, crucial anchor keeping your power from drifting out into tyranny.
If you take just one thing away from this whole explainer, let it be this one uncompromising truth. True power is not in control, it is in justice and responsibility. At the end of the day, you're not going to be judged by the sheer amount of power you grabbed, or your fancy title, or how many people report to you. You'll be judged entirely by how you chose to use that power to foster justice and take real responsibility for your corner of the world.
So, as we wrap up today's lecture on ancient leadership philosophy, I want to leave you with this final thought to weigh against your own moral compass. Think about the leadership choices you're going to make tomorrow. Honestly, will those decisions benefit yourself or the greater good? The path of the Prince of Jerusalem is definitely challenging, but it is without a doubt the true path of responsible leadership. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this framework helps you lead with a bit more wisdom and fairness going forward.